IVM.
What does the future of healthcare have in store for us? How is it evolving to help people live not just longer, but better? Health has always been a crucial topic of debate, but it has never been a part of conversations like this before. Welcome to Health as We Know It, presented by Abbott, where we talk about how innovations in health are shifting the way we see, manage, and treat it. Welcome to today's episode on structural heart diseases. The term structural heart disease covers a realm of health conditions that affect the walls, chambers, or muscles of our most vital organ, the heart. These ailments can be born with us, develop as we age, or result from other medical conditions. Intriguingly, cardiovascular diseases tend to strike Indians a decade earlier than those in the West. It's a global fact that mitral regurgitation, commonly seen as an aging disease, affects 1 in 10 individuals over 75. However, the heart doesn't discriminate by age, and each year, over 200,000 newborns grapple with congenital heart diseases, with nearly a fifth needing urgent intervention within their first year of life. Navigating treatment options for these conditions can be a daunting task. Around 50% of patients with severe mitral valve issues can undergo surgical intervention due to age or other health complications. Furthermore, the invasive nature of surgeries for congenital heart diseases often lead to extended hospital stays and considerable mortality rates. Join us as we delve on these complexities, the cutting-edge technologies addressing them, and the promise they hold for the future of cardiac care. And with us today, we are pleased to welcome Mr. Santosh Prabhu, the Divisional Vice President of Product Development at Abbott, with an academic foundation in aerospace and mechanical engineering. Mr. Prabhu transitioned his knowledge of materials and computational techniques to the cardiovascular medical device field over 2 decades ago. He is a key contributor to Abbott's structural heart business, having been instrumental in launching pioneering products, including the world's first catheter-based tricuspid valve repair system and a minimally invasive device designed specifically for infants with life-threatening heart conditions. We are also pleased to have with us today Dr. Praveen Chandra, who is a prominent Indian cardiologist and chairman of Interventional Cardiology at Medanta Medicity, Gurgaon. He is recognized as one of the leaders in angioplasty in the country. He has been awarded the Padma Shri in 2016 for his contributions to medicine. Dr. Chandra performed India's first percutaneous aortic valve implantation without surgery. He's also performed India's first ever percutaneous mitral valve repair. His impressive career includes directing cardiac services, publishing extensively, and pioneering cardiac procedures in India. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Mr. Santosh, I'd like to start with you. It's great to have you with us. Let's dive in.
Thanks for having me.
Your career trajectory has taken a fascinating turn from aerospace and mechanical engineering to medical device innovation. Can you share what inspired this journey?
Yes, Divyam. As a child growing up, I was always fascinated with planes, rockets, and space travel. And when I was doing my undergraduate studies in aerospace engineering at IIT Bombay, I grew very interested in composite materials that were used in aerospace structures. And I used computational modeling and experimental techniques to study new materials that were being used for aerospace applications, novel aerospace applications. The skills that I had developed as part of my academic research were directly applicable to the design of stents. It is rather ironic because I had lost my dad to a heart attack when I was just 7. And if these devices were available at that time, many years earlier, they could indeed have saved his life. So I thought this was my calling. Thanks to a very strong team and dedicated team, we developed about 3 generations of these transcatheter mitral valve repair devices in 4 years. And we also took this concept into the tricuspid space and developed the first of its kind transcatheter tricuspid valve repair system. I'm now responsible for not just mitral and tricuspid repair, but also for TAVI, transcatheter aortic valve implantation, for the surgical valves, for transcatheter mitral valve replacement, tricuspid valve replacement, and also structural interventions, which is our occluder-based therapies for pediatric and congenital applications, as well as for stroke prevention. So I love what I do, developing new and innovative products that help people suffering from some of the most serious and burdensome structural heart diseases live better and fuller lives is what I'm passionate about. And I intend to continue to do that in the future.
At what point did you begin to focus on structural heart issues, and what drew you to the medical device field?
So this was around the time I was finishing my PhD. And I was starting to explore career options, and of course, aerospace engineering was one of those fields. But I was open to other areas too. In fact, I had been associated with aerospace engineering through my undergrad, master's, and PhD. Close to 10 years. So I was trying to see if there are other areas that I should explore. And at that time, I got a call from Abbott, and I was really impressed with what the company was doing in terms of designing these cutting edge stent technologies. And as I said, I have a personal connection to it too. So in 2014, early 2014, I started working on transcatheter mitral valve repair. And, we were working on figuring out what the next generation product concepts would be. Around that time, around 2015, 2016, more like 2015, I started thinking about, if it can be used to treat one valve, the mitral valve, why can't it be used to treat the tricuspid valve? And there weren't any transcatheter solutions for treating tricuspid regurgitation at that point. Ours was the first one. And indeed, the tricuspid valve, for that reason, was known as the forgotten valve. There were not many treatment options available for treating tricuspid regurgitation.
And why was that the case? Was it because it was a very complex issue to deal with?
Well, the patients are relatively sick. The doctors would want to repair or replace the mitral valve and leave the tricuspid valve as it is, because the mortality associated with some of these surgeries, because remember, there was no transcatheter option, the mortality associated with some of the tricuspid surgeries was very high. So as a result, these patients were largely left untreated.
Thank you so much. Dr. Chandra, we'd all like to hear you speak on today's topic. And I'd like to start by asking you about life expectancy. Life expectancy in India has seen a dramatic increase. And while that is a compliment on how the country is progressing, we're also seeing some potential flip side, specifically when it comes to the heart health of people at each end of the life spectrum, newborns and geriatric. Could you help us understand this a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, what you are saying is that the life expectancy in the Indian patients has increased. Certainly, that's the good news. But the problem is, when people live longer, they will have more chances of developing diseases, which are age-related diseases. So now, those patients who are living longer in life, they will have degenerative changes in the body. Similarly, the heart also sees some changes happening over the years as the age progresses. And many times, the valves of the heart become degenerated. They lead to narrowing of the heart valves, they lead to leakage of the heart valves, and many times blockages of the arteries, etc. So these are the problems which come with increasing age.
Okay. Are these ailments new in nature, or are there other challenges unique to the vulnerable populations that the current solutions are unable to meet or address?
Yeah. So basically what happened is that, when we started seeing patients living longer, we also started seeing more diseases happening at this age. So now the problem was that when these diseases started happening, we started trying to treat them by the conventional methods. But then, if you, for a diseased valve which is either narrowed down or leaking, the treatment option was surgery. But at an advanced stage like 75, 76, 77, if you do surgery, then the risks are running very high. So that is why the limitations started coming in. How to treat these patients? How to treat those elderly patients who have leakage of the valves or narrowing of the valves? And then we started thinking of options which are without surgery. So this is the need, the necessity the nature gave to us to invent or to design more safer methods for treatment of these heart problems which are unique to this age group of patients.
Okay, so how does the care or treatment paradigm need to shift to accommodate this treatment option, both from a healthcare professional as well as a caregiver standpoint?
Yeah, so as I already mentioned, that, as far as the patient is concerned, for him also, for an elderly patient, undergoing a surgery for the heart becomes too cumbersome. And the recovery times are longer, the complication rates are longer, and the more complications happen, and sometimes patients may not even make it. So that is the challenge from the patient side. Then from the doctor's side or from the healthcare side, again, taking care of this patient becomes more difficult, and we have to deploy more, measures to take care of these problems. So that is why we have started now treating them with newer methods of treatment, which is percutaneous methods, where we do not do any surgery. Only through the help of injections we are able to sometimes replace these valves, sometimes repair these valves. All this is now possible just with the help of the injection. No cut, no stitch, no surgery.
Got it. Got it. Now, Mr. Santosh, could you discuss the latest innovations in technology aiding patients with structural heart conditions?
Yeah.
Particularly how the use of unique materials are expanding possibilities for treatment.
So the materials are some sort of these enabling technologies that help advancing some of these medical device concepts. And then there are also new manufacturing and processing technologies that are being introduced that allow us to manufacture very intricate components used in the medical devices. Till about 10 to 15 years ago, such manufacturing technologies probably did not exist. For example, for our transcatheter mitral valve repair product, the evolution of certain laser cutting technologies allowed us to develop a new component using the alloy nitinol. There is an element there in the device called the gripper, which we made out of nitinol. Using this component, it had a very intricate pattern. Using this component in the device allowed us to now improve the clinical performance of the device and allowed us to treat more complex cases. And if it weren't for these advances in manufacturing technology, we would not have been able to do that. Now, let's take another example of a patent ductus arteriosus device used to treat heart condition in prematurely born babies. Novel and new catheter technologies that we are developing are allowing us to have this right combination in that catheter of stiffness, which allows you to advance the catheter, and flexibility, which allows you to navigate the tortuous anatomy of the baby, and therefore deliver this tiny pea-sized device implant in a very precise manner to the anatomy of these babies, and thus giving them a new lease at life. We also have to look at machine learning, AI-based technologies that are allowing doctors to better analyze clinical data, diagnose disease states, and also determine a treatment plan to get better outcomes.
And I am aware that you touched upon it when you were talking about newborn babies and the pea-sized implants that you have, but I'm curious about the specific improvements these new technologies have brought to the patients' lives. Could you provide more examples?
Yeah, so in many cases, right, for instance, if you look at a transcatheter mitral valve repair, a lot of these patients are very frail. They have other comorbidities, they have previous surgeries. And so, for them, surgery would not have been an option. So by and large, there would be very little treatment option for them. They would be on medication. Now, medication is used to relieve some of the symptoms, but it wouldn't treat the disease. Now, having the transcatheter mitral valve repair product actually allows us to treat these patients who previously would have no other option, be treated, and they live their life. They have a new, as I said, get a new start to their life, and it helps them live their life to the fullest.
Stepping back a bit, for those fortunate enough not to be affected, could you outline the heart-related conditions your work addresses and the diverse age groups your work caters to?
Yes, so we basically treat different structural heart disease condition. Basically, we either treat valvular defects or we plug holes in the heart. And when we talk about valvular defects, basically there are 4 different heart valves. There's the mitral valve, there's a tricuspid valve, there's the aortic valve, and the pulmonic valve. And all these 4 valves have to function perfectly if you have to pump blood throughout the body and provide oxygenated blood throughout the body. So what we have developed is devices for treating these valvular defects. And then the other issue we have is also holes in the chambers of the heart. So we have devices that actually plug these holes using a catheter-based technology. And then also there are certain devices that we have for stroke prevention. For instance, there is a vestigial organ called the left atrial appendage, which is a vestigial part of the left atrium. And sometimes when you have atrial fibrillation or irregular heartbeat, you could essentially have a clot being formed in the left atrial appendage, and this clot can then migrate to the brain and cause a stroke. And so we have developed a device that actually plugs the left atrial appendage and prevents the clot from being formed. Essentially, it isolates that part of the heart. Now, previously, before the advent of all these catheter-based technologies, surgery was the option. Now, so you would have open chest surgery. But what has happened is, a lot of these patients, they cannot undergo open chest surgery because of age, medical conditions, they have had previous surgeries, etc. So for them, we have developed this catheter-based solution. And by catheter-based solution, what I mean is that the device is delivered through a tiny incision, so it eliminates the need for open chest, open heart surgery.
So to clarify, you're tackling diseases like mitral regurgitation and stroke prevention. Would conventional open heart surgeries resolve these issues if we set aside comorbid conditions?
Yes, it could be fairly common. And a lot of these are, when they say congenital, either these are diseases that you're born with, or some of the other diseases such as the mitral regurgitation or tricuspid regurgitation. These diseases develop with age. You had, say, for instance, you could have a heart attack, and therefore, you could result in mitral regurgitation. Or, as people are starting to live longer and longer, certain parts of the heart, for instance, the cords in the heart might just wear out and break, causing, again, mitral regurgitation. So it's either diseases that you're born with or diseases that are caused with the wear and tear of the heart.
Hypothetically speaking, if we leave comorbidities aside, would an open heart surgery or an open chest surgery or open chest procedure solve all of these issues?
Well, some of these diseases could be solved using open chest surgery. But as I said, not everyone is a candidate for open chest surgery, right? So therefore, you need these solutions where the device is delivered using a tiny catheter through an incision in the groin as opposed to opening the chest. The other thing also is some of these procedures are becoming very commonplace, right? And we are running clinical trials to prove this. So even if you are not at high risk for surgery, even if you don't have comorbidities that we talked about earlier, would a catheter-based technology that I described earlier would be a solution even for people who are not at high risk. And we are running clinical trials to prove that. Because you wouldn't want an open chest surgery, if there's a simpler way, as effective way to do it with opening a chest, right?
Now, Dr. Chandra, what can you tell us about heart issue interventions in babies as young as 3 days old? And how has that technology progressed in your experience?
So as as the technology goes, it has developed quite a lot. So treat patients even in the fetus. Although I'm not a specialist who does treatment of fetal problems, fetal heart diseases, or even the young children, but many of my colleagues who are pediatric heart interventions or pediatric heart cardiologists, they can treat these patients quite easily actually. And there are many methods now to close the holes of the heart, to disconnect the abnormal arteries, connecting good and bad blood. And of course, treating these patients again without surgery becomes a challenge, but it has now become a reality and it is very promising.
Got it. So, we've spoken a bit about the innovations per se. Mr. Santosh, could you speak about the advantages of these innovations for both patients and physicians, including any indirect benefits?
So if you look at, for the patients, of course, you are developing, and we went through some of the disease state and the products that we have. So if you look at it, of course, we want to treat some of these serious and debilitating diseases, structural heart diseases that these patients have, whether it's holes in the chambers of the heart or, diseased mitral, aortic, or tricuspid valves, right? So we have products to do that. So some of these patients, for instance, who have mitral regurgitation, they can barely get out of bed. Sometimes they are on a heart transplant list even. And then you get this tiny little device that is delivered using this tiny catheter, and it goes and grabs the leaflets of the mitral valve and treats the backflow of the blood or mitral regurgitation. And now you can see the patient is back up, walking, doing some of the things that, in the past they were able to do, but since they had mitral regurgitation, they couldn't do. And the same with tricuspid regurgitation, same with aortic stenosis. So it gives them a new lease on life, right? So that's another thing. And also, if you look at some of these catheter-based technologies, the recovery time is faster, the hospital stay is smaller, and some of the medications that these patients have to take after the surgery, if they went to open chest surgery, that medication is also reduced. So there are a lot of secondary effects of using these newer technologies too.
So if a doctor is used to one particular kind of procedure, obviously they've been trained in that procedure for possibly a long amount of time. I want to ask you, how challenging is it for doctors to train in and adopt these new technologies that, you've spoken of?
Yeah, let's talk about the doctors, right? Assume that, they are learning a new procedure to treat these patients, right? What happens is these structural heart diseases, as I described, you can probably glean that they are usually complex procedures, and the complexity is multifactorial. There is an anatomical variability from patient to patient, and delivering the device to treat these diseases, therefore, can be challenging. And if you look at these catheter-based technologies, where you deliver the device using a catheter, at time it becomes very difficult to see the anatomy, because remember, now you're not having open chest surgery. When you do open chest surgery, you have the chest open, you have the heart open, you can directly visualize, see the valve, right? And therefore put in a replacement valve or repair that valve in surgery. Now, those imaging technologies are improving, but now for these catheter-based technologies, you visualize these different disease traits using ultrasound. You're not directly visualizing it, right? So this is a very intricate procedure. And the doctor now has to not only know how to use the device, but needs to have a good grasp of the imaging to understand what he or she is seeing. So they have to be very precise in how they make that hole in the wall of the heart too.
So one of the things that I wanted to touch upon, Mr. Santosh, in relation to the materials, is the issue of biocompatibility and the ability of these materials to cause or not cause any adverse reactions when it comes into contact with the heart. So how do you ensure such biocompatibility and prevent adverse reactions?
That's a very good question. One of the things that we as a medical device company do is extensive biocompatibility testing on all the products and the components that we use in these products. And so these are very well screened, well studied. We studied them in animal models. And there's a whole plethora of biocompatibility testing that we have to do. And there are standards and guidances associated with these biocompatibility tests that we have to meet. And there are stringent requirements. And some of these materials that we use, we know they have good biocompatibility because they have been historically used for a long time. For instance, I mentioned nitinol, which is an alloy of nickel and titanium. It's a mix of two different metals. It has been used in several different biomedical applications, and we know that it's a biocompatible material. But nonetheless, we still, as part of our testing, would evaluate the biocompatibility of the products. So that's something that we do. Not just biocompatibility, we also evaluate other things such as fatigue resistance. In the sense, if you look at a lot of our devices, they're used in the heart. There is a pulse style loading, right? The beating of the heart, which is not a constant load, but is a very pulsating, fluctuating load. And we want to make sure that the device can withstand it. And we test it using computational modeling. We test it using fatigue testers. There is corrosion resistance, make sure that the material doesn't corrode inside the human body. And we do testing for that too. So there's a whole battery of tests that we do to prove that the material and the device that we use are safe and effective.
It seems we are integrating processes and devices from beyond healthcare. How important and feasible is it to seek innovations outside the medical field?
In fact, it's very critical and important for us to look at innovations outside the medtech space and leverage those in the design of medical devices. And that has happened in many instances. For example, the computational technique I mentioned, finite element analysis, which is used to study cardiovascular behavior of these medical devices and simulate the performance of these devices under the loading conditions that it experiences, right, during the beating of the heart. These finite element analysis techniques were first developed for the aerospace industry, but now they are very commonplace in understanding the performance of medical devices and even guiding their design. Similarly, some of the materials that are most commonly used in medical devices were first developed for other industrial applications. For example, I've mentioned nitinol a few times, which is an alloy of nickel and titanium. There is NITINOL. So there's a NOL at the end of it, and that NOL stands for Naval Ordnance Laboratory. So it is designed potentially for naval applications, but now it has found its way into cardiovascular medical devices, whether it is peripheral stents, valve frames, and even for devices that are used for mitral valve repair that we talked about. And then there are other technologies like lasers. So these lasers are used for cutting these stent frames. And when you make the valve, there's a metallic part of it. Those are called stents. For these catheter-based valves, the frames, those are called stents. And those are cut using lasers. And lasers have predominantly used in the diamond cutting industry. And so they have found their way into cutting stents, right? And now we also look at robotics technologies that have made their inroads in the medtech space. And a lot of complex, critical, surgical, and minimally invasive procedures are performed using robotic technologies, which were first invented for manufacturing in other industries, such as automotive and food processing. So these are just a few examples. There are many more. But it's indeed important for us to keep our eyes and ears open and look for opportunities to leverage these technologies across industry. And that's what most innovators do.
So I guess you have to be proactive in looking out for all of these technologies that are there from different industries. These don't seem the kind of innovations that find their way onto the internet or the paper on your desk. You'd have to be looking out for them.
You're right. And sometimes you have a problem that you want to solve, right? And then that's when you start thinking about, I thought of it, I had used this in some other industry, some other area, but, this might work here. And so you try to bring it in. And not all of these would work. But, as I gave some of the examples, they have worked, right? In some cases, it is pre-planned. And some cases, it's just based on the experience and just serendipity that you cross these things.
Okay, good. That's good to know. And lastly, and this question is for both the guests today, we'd love to know what's next in structural heart. And what are some of the future trends in treating structural heart conditions that you are looking forward to?
Yeah, so these structural heart conditions means the disease of the valves, etc. All this is now progressing so rapidly. New valves are being developed, and new methods of putting them is developed, and even smaller devices. Like earlier, it used to be big. Now they are very miniature. So the injury to the patient is very minimal. They go home the very next day after the procedure, and they face very less complications and less chances of taking so many medications.
Gentlemen, do you have any final thoughts or insights that you would like to leave the audience with?
So today, in this era of newer developments in every field, healthcare has also seen exponential rise of new technology helping patients. And for the patient, it is very, very patient friendly. So people can just, if they are advised to undergo that, they should not hesitate and they should get it done.
Mr. Santosh, any final thoughts?
Yes. So after working on drug-eluting stents, when I started working on advancing our transcatheter mitral valve repair product portfolio, I would actually see some of those procedures and then even get to meet some of the patients, particularly during our customer appreciation day. And these were patients who had our transcatheter mitral valve repair product. And I would think that if my father was alive, he would be around the age of that patient or those patients. So for me, the work that I do has a very personal connection. And the fact that I have spent pretty much all my career, all 23 years of it, designing medical devices for cardiovascular applications is testimony to that fact.
Thank you, Mr. Santosh Prabhu and Dr. Praveen Chandra, for your enlightening insights in today's discussion. Your expertise has brilliantly illuminated the evolving landscape of structural heart disease and the transformative impact of medical technology. We deeply appreciate your time and the depth of knowledge shared. Let's remember, addressing structural heart issues is about current treatment methods, embracing cutting-edge innovations that enhance the quality of life across all ages. It also involves the healthcare industry pushing the boundaries of what's possible. ensuring treatments are more accessible and less invasive. And finally, it requires policymakers and medical communities collaborating to advance cardiac care. We thank you for joining us on this episode of Health as We Know It. Stay tuned for more insights and stories that drive the future of healthcare. Thanks for listening.
IVM